No, but so she's not. Somehow I
Not
thought there
this
was.
week, anyway.
Yeah.
She has no money to go there. No, when she
Okay.
needed to move, because of course she didn't bother to read the emails from you.
So how you doing? Good. How you doing? Good. Good. Yeah. We were laughing that many of our people. This is graduation weekend from multiple schools. Our high schools, our college and university. There are multiple places, and so there would normally be another 20, 30 people in the room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so people, and some are trickling in. Yeah, so it's an interesting.
It's kind of a strange forum. Sometimes it's standing room only, and other times
We'll
it's
have
like
20 people.
Yeah, yeah. You hardly have anybody,
Yeah,
so you never know.
right. I guess
I call
I'll be
myself
right on
a
time. It's 9:30.
but I have learned how to and now
Good morning, friends. A warm welcome to those of you who are here in the room at Grace St. Luke's in Tresvant Hall and those who will be joining us or watching online. We have an opportunity to engage a conversation with a group from St. John's Cathedral in Denver, Colorado. And before I take us any further, let's have a moment of silence and prayer. Gracious God, for the goodness of this day that you have given us, for our blessings known and unknown, for opportunities to gather in faith and service, in learning and in growth, in justice and in peace. Thank you for those who travel around the world, travel on pilgrimages. Every day we have an opportunity to walk by faith and not by sight as our own pilgrimage, and we acknowledge today the group from St. John's, Denver, as they have been on pilgrimage to Montgomery and on to Memphis. Be with them, be with us as we continue in faith. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
So just a few opening remarks. You may be going, why is St. John's Denver at Grace St. Luke's, right? Well, their former dean and our former rector, Richard Lawson, was a part of a conversation with them as they were planning a trip to go to Montgomery, Alabama. And he said, there's no way you can go to Montgomery and not keep going to my place where I used to live. Well, he went and got elected, right? And so in light of that, Deacon Karn, who's here to my left, he agreed to be a part of what this would have been. And I said to them, I would say this since this is being recorded. Richard, if you're watching, you started all of this.
Yes.
But Richard and I would have been having a conversation about their journey and about Richard's time in Memphis and his own journey around racial healing. And so now we get to have a conversation with people with whom he's been in community for a last long while. So it is with that that I'd like to just let each person introduce, and we'll start with Deacon Jack. Just introduce yourself, maybe first and last name, and then how long you've been at St. John's Cathedral, and then we'll start our questions.
Thank you, Father Ollie. On behalf of the pilgrims, it's an honor to be with you this morning, to see all our pilgrims and to see members of the church here listening and learning with us. My name is Jack Karn. I'm the deacon at St. John's Cathedral, deacon for community partnerships. I've been at the cathedral in Denver for almost 3.5 years.
Yes, I think you did. So my name is Bruce Hefner. I've been a member of St. John's for 38 years. I've been guided in my path by 4 different deans, and I'm about to have another interim dean and a new dean after that. So grateful to be here. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Stork. I've been at St. John's for 3 years. I'm a member of the Reimagining Justice Committee. I'm the clerk of the vestry, and I sing first soprano in the choir.
My name is Susan Ritter. I've been a member of St. John's for 9 years, although I came to services for quite a few years, commuting into Denver before that. And I am a member of a couple of groups, the Reimagining Justice Group and a few others, just a regular parishioner.
Okay, thank you. So, Deacon Jack, what was the impetus of this pilgrimage? How did this come about? You have a large group, of course, here, and it was an opportunity for me to get to see them on Friday night. But tell us about the impetus of the pilgrimage.
Well, certainly, I would say there was a lay seed planting and a clergy response. And so Susan Ritter is a wonderful chair of our Reimagining Justice, our racial justice group at St. John's Cathedral. And Susan was hoping that we might be able to do this type of pilgrimage through St. John's. And she approached Dean Richard Lawson about this idea, and Dean Richard was responsive and eager to see it happen. And so then he started working with Susan and working with us to bring it to life. And of course, then he was elected bishop. And so that's how I got on board. But of course, cheering, and I consider myself a professional cheerleader sometimes, cheering on the work of racial justice and healing. And so working with Susan, Nancy, Bruce, and many of the pilgrims in this work at the cathedral parish level. And then this is the first pilgrimage, civil rights pilgrimage that I've been on to come to these sites.
Okay, well, thank you. So a question for the lay pilgrims, because, of course, Susan, you shared some of the story, but what drew you to join this trip? I mean, there are lots of trips that people can take, and church trips, group trips, but what is it about this trip? Either the three of you, whoever would like to speak first, what drew you to join on this journey?
Well, I'm just have always been a person engaging in good trouble, I guess you might call it. So I always wanted to do this. I've heard about these civil rights pilgrimages, and so I am drawn to this kind of thing. And I had never been to the South before, so this has been first time in Alabama, Mississippi, and we walked over to Arkansas yesterday. So, but the work and the hope also of doing it in community was a huge attraction for me.
For me, I think it was the history of lynching in America that particularly spoke to me. And when I moved to Colorado, I discovered that Preston Porter was lynched at 15 in Lyman. And I also read about the lynching memorial in Montgomery, and I particularly wanted to see that. And we have organized 2 vigils for him. So for me, that was the strongest link, that where there's a death, a sacrificial death like that, I think that's what a pilgrimage is meant to remember, that we're not on a cruise here. We are here to commemorate and make sure that those people are not forgotten.
So a couple of my reasons for going were kind of selfish. I wanted to spend more time with Dean Richard and soak up his knowledge. That didn't quite work out. But we did get to spend a day with him on, I guess it was Wednesday. I've also been on some trips with other folks from St. John's, and I wanted to relive that experience. But I also knew that it wouldn't be it'll be a little different this time. And I'm very concerned about what's happening in this country and in the world, and I need to take a stand. I'm not sure how to do it. St. John's has a lot of ministries, and I thought if I go on a trip with these people who know more about the ministries, I can understand better what I can do.
Okay, thank you. So, Montgomery, and I always just am curious, who here has been to Montgomery before? Okay, okay. And then next question, who here has been to the Equal Justice Initiative's sites? Okay. And so many of you may be aware, but Grace St. Luke's actually had a pilgrimage with Calvary Church and went to Montgomery, and Reverend Laura Geddes helped to organize that with Reverend Catherine Bush, and they went and had a powerful time. And I had an opportunity to go with my wife and another clergy couple, and we had an amazing experience. And I want to go back because there's so much more that's been added since I went. And so I'm just mindful of their people who continue to want to go, and I know there'll be other opportunities. But why Montgomery? There are lots of places in the South that you could have chosen. Naturally, I was thinking, why not Memphis first? No, but why Montgomery? Why Montgomery?
We thought about we knew Montgomery because the lynching really was part of it, and Jennifer also is in the group, the Colorado Lynching Memorial Project. Jennifer, Nancy, and I are in that group. So the lynching was the huge, big push to begin with, so we knew we were going to go to Montgomery. Then Richard said, well, we could go to Birmingham or we could go to Memphis. We might go to Memphis. And he said, well, I don't want to, push that. But we thought, well, we're going to be going to the South with a native son. You've been to Memphis. Coming here was a draw. So
Okay,
that's how that happened.
thank you.
I would say Brian Stevenson is a large factor because of his book, Just Mercy. I was involved in developing the bibliography for our group, and we are doing a book cart in the fall with a number of important books. I personally keep copies of The Color of Law with me at all times and hand them out to people for free because people tend to say, oh, the Civil War solved all these problems, or Martin Luther King solved all these problems. You know, what do I, as a well-off white American, have to do with any of this? And I give them that book, and it opens in 1950s California with the racial covenants written for the housing. And I think that often opens people's eyes who've lived in segregated communities and thought, well, it's not my problem. And so I think that Brian Stevenson, the fact that the memorials are there and they're so powerful and so worth a visit, he has done an astonishing job. But I think it's the book that started it.
Well, the tour was laid out for us already, but I've realized that Montgomery is basically the cradle of civil rights in the United States, and so it's important that we go there with the bus boycott and the freedom marches. Memphis, too, with Dr. King, his final bold action here that unfortunately led to his death. These are the places to be.
So all of that, for me, looking at it also through the lens of the life and ministry of Dr. King and this death. And so Montgomery seems to be this focal point where he was called into public ministry in a much more intentional way with his election as president of this local body, and then all the actions that he took. So I really saw that Montgomery as kind of the birth of King's, or the beginning of King's public ministry, and then of course Memphis being where he was assassinated and the end of his public ministry, and then the new life that comes out of all the things that have happened since the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. I was looking at it through that lens. I was also struck by all of these EJI sites because I hadn't experienced any of them. My personal pilgrimage to the South was in the midst of a road trip between Maine, where I'm from originally, and Houston, Texas, where I lived for 4.5 years with my wife. and stopped in Birmingham and visited the 16th Street Church to see that site and to remember and pray and reflect on the bombing there. And so to see these EJI sites and to experience them, to having not read Stevenson's book and not known too much about these sites, but known some about the history, but to really take it all in along with these pilgrims, it was very profound for me, and is of course the opportunity to take this work, to take the things I've seen back home with us and continue the good work we've been doing.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've all spoken in one way or another about how Memphis came about, but obviously you've just arrived here on Friday from Montgomery, and so I'm curious to hear some highlights from visiting the Equal Justice Initiative sites, and maybe which one stood out in particular to you, but some highlights in whatever order you'd like to take to speak to that.
I'll continue. One of the profound things for me was the proximity of the hotel that's just been built. There's a hotel that's just been built right next to the memorial site, and then the what's that lower little Montgomery Square. The proximity I've never experienced. The accommodations where you're actually going to stay and sleep and eat right next to a very important historical site. I'm sure it exists, but I just had never experienced that. And of course, new accommodations. So the accommodations are very nice, which is lovely. And so you get good rest. And so I found that really special because, how often do we see, where you're staying and that being, a place of comfort and a place of rest and quality right next to where you're going to be jumping into a very uncomfortable experience and time of learning and prayer and reflection, and of course the spiritual element and all of that. I think I'll stick with the boat ride. We took a short ride on a river boat, and it was, of course, it's a very peaceful, or it can be depending on the weather and the water. The day we went, we had a nice breeze, smooth waters, a peaceful ride of 20 minutes, a short boat ride. But I just found that element to be a powerful part of all the different things that we were experiencing, and to look at these sites as engaging with different senses, different parts of our senses. Of course, we're engaging in a spiritual way, we're engaging in an emotional way. The boat ride having a physical element to it, of riding and on the water and things like that. The seeing of nature on the water. The sun shining, what we're hearing, all of these things that are engaging our different senses. But of course, there's joy and pleasure in that, but there's also an opportunity in the midst of our journey as pilgrims to reflect on the suffering and the struggle of African Americans who were enslaved, and the significance of the river and the slave trade, and how the boat ride elevated that.
Okay, thank you. Who's next?
All of it, I was focused on the lynching museum and the work we've done with Preston Porter, and I think one of our ground rules when we began this was to stay in the present and feel and experience what was happening. And I often have to stop myself, particularly in the EJI Museum. So much information, so wonderfully displayed, easy to digest, to stop and remember the human, that isn't just information. But the sculpture garden, I think, just amazed me. I had no idea it was there. And I thought, okay, a sculpture garden. Just a very powerful art. Amazing, emotional, I definitely have to go back. I felt like I felt that I was running through all of these places. I could have spent twice as much time.
Okay.
So very powerful.
There are two things there. So the boat launch was like a retired boat launch. It had been something that clearly had been shut down that the EJI, organization had brought back to life. I found that very powerful. And then with the sculpture garden after leaving, it's in a very industrial area. I don't know if there's a dump there or there's metal recycling sites right there, and then the railroad is right there, which of course has impact on all the things that we're talking about how people were moved and trafficked. But to think about the purchase of land to build the sculpture garden there in the midst of those sites are usually on the edge of town, on the margin of town. And where there was all this twisted metal and or debris or refuse or trash and things like that, and to take that land and resurrect it, bring it back to life in such a beautiful, creative, healing way. I found that to be another profound part of like the location of that garden.
Yeah.
And that wall on the way out, that wall with those names, it was just mind-blowing.
And the wall is huge. It's on the scale of the Washington Monument. And I think he wanted to create a monument, and it is monumental. The size of that sculpture garden, most of the sculptures are 3 and 4 times life size. The final wall with all the names of the known names of all the slaves in America, and you will find your name there. Believe me, your name is on there. And it is like the size of this church. It's so big. And these larger-than-life horses galloping with a black man lying on its back with sneakers, and it forces you to think about a Confederate statue and a contemporary man in a state of distress. The woman picking cotton, and her child is turning to her. These are statues saying, "Mama, I hurt my hand." It tears your heart. You cannot leave that place unchanged. It is a monumental place in the sense that this memory is being remembered as it should be, as it should have been. The lynching memorial, as you walk from our hotel, Jack mentioned, it's a block away. And when you're outside it, you see every one of those hanging things from the street. You cannot miss it. And the way it's designed, you see it as you go by, but when you enter, you go up and you slowly descend. And you're at their level at first. You're standing as if they were people next to you, and slowly they rise as you descend. And then there are these strange wooden squares on the floor, and I was saying, why do they have those? Well, that's so you won't hit your head. So you cannot walk under them, and then you get down to the lowest, and they're above you. And now they're inscribed underneath. The amount of research, and I'm an historian by training, the amount of research Brian Stevenson and his team have done, there are, and you can tell how many people in each county by the size of the scripts. Some of them just have 3. Others, the writing gets so small, and then you realize, oh, these 24 people were killed in the same day. And you cannot absorb it all without spending the full day there. But the emotional impact of going down and coming out was incredible.
Yeah, and also the Legacy Museum in Montgomery has so much information. We were there for, I think, 2 hours at least, but that still wasn't nearly enough. And you start out looking at as much as you can, and you realize that you're going to have to skip some things, and that was the sad part of that museum. But there was a reflection room with faces of Black lives that just really touched you there. And the injustice of the justice system is really highlighted in that museum as well. I mean, there's so many highlights from all the places we went that we could be here for several hours and not get to all of them. But
You can see a thread, though, of connectivity in the EJI sites, or I sense that, the intention of trying to weave these different locations together so that there's a coherent movement for people, and probably, you know, an ordering of how you move through the sites. And if there, you know, if one has an awareness of that, if I'm even on the right track, that, you know, it will bear even more, you know, fruit in terms of learning and growth for the pilgrim or for the, you know, the observer.
Well, thank you for that. Well, I mean, and I'm mindful that there was so much in that, and then you made your way by bus. You stopped through Muscle Shoals,
Yeah.
and stopped at the museum there, and then you
was cool.
arrived here to Memphis. And so what are some highlights from Memphis, just you 24, 48 hours that you experienced? I know the National Civil Rights Museum was a significant part of your time. But what are some highlights from being at the National Civil Rights Museum?
Again, being absolutely in a place, standing on the ground where things happened was powerful for me. But once again, here again, so much research. I too am a historian. I appreciate the depth of work that's been done, the way that it's been laid out, easy for people to access, and that it clearly does not treat this. This is a history that brings us to today, and every one of these places exemplified that today, here are the problems we have today. You can go back and see how we got where we are by not confronting and facing this history as it happened.
For me in Memphis, it was the room that James Earl Ray rented and asked if it had a view of the Lorraine Hotel. And to see that, and to see the actual room, like the bed, it was a boarding room, and to think of him sleeping there and then to see the view from the window was profoundly disturbing, that someone can move so calmly and with such deliberation through the world to plan this, to pay his rent. You know what it is? It's the mundanity of things. You know, you pulled back this blanket and you slept here, and that's what you were going to do the next day. And how can people be that evil? I guess that's what astonishes me. And I just recently learned that there's a group in Tennessee that's running a marathon that's partly based on the route he took when he escaped from prison. And I thought, what are you doing, people? They say, oh, James Earl Ray escaped from prison, and he got 8 miles into the Tennessee woods before they captured him, and now we're going to run a 100-mile marathon on this route. And I just think, what are people doing?
The Civil Rights Museum in Memphis was the most powerful place that we went for me, because so many of the things happened in my lifetime when I could remember when they happened. Bringing it back, bringing a lot of things that I had blocked from my memory that I had not thought of until yesterday when we were there. And many things that I didn't know about while they were happening, and I wanted to know why. What was it that kept me in my sheltered life from not knowing about these things? And yeah.
Going back to Montgomery for a moment, you know, seeing the church where Dr. King was a pastor was powerful for me as a deacon, and you know, a small church, and so just seeing these places that you do not get to see unless you physically visit a place, and to walk around these places, to witness and to see, and I forget where it was said recently, but just that things were small. Things were not. We hear about things in history books and stories that make things so grand, and they truly become that in legacy. But to see those churches and see his home, I found that very touching. That someone can of course come from humble beginnings and never move into a great mansion, but their ministry or their life's work shows the riches of a holy life, and treasures in heaven for sure. So in Memphis, I think I took a photo of the spot where Dr. King died and breathed his last, and he's had an impact on my ministry and my journey to be in front of you as a deacon and to do this work and lean into this call of service and social justice. And so, I take that with me as a reminder. I don't know the next time or if I will ever visit Memphis, Tennessee, and see these sites again. So I hold on to it as a moment of time and inspiration and empowerment for me in the Christian walk I feel called to embark upon, so that when I go back to Denver and continue it, I do not lose that flame or that spark. And of course, then to be at the Lorraine Motel and to see what has just come out of tragedy. I think that's always hopeful and inspired to see all the life that's come out of tragedy. And of course, that it's not guaranteed, that it's fragile. And of course, that we were there on the day that this whole second half of the museum opened, and I didn't make it in there, but I'm glad it opened, and there was jubilee and celebration on that day. That was beautiful.
Thank you. So the last question, in just a moment, we'll have time to take questions from the congregation, but what have you, if you were to reflect on how you've been impacted on this journey, if there were a word or a phrase, but how you've been impacted. And the second part of that is what has changed or what has turned over in your life as you're preparing to go home. You've taken in a lot. So, yeah. So,
Focus definitely on a lot of history and, as Nancy said, evil things done by a lot of people. But I think I need to focus on what am I doing? What have I done where I see but don't act or understand and don't do. So, as it was eloquently stated in our prayer session last night, stop being a bystander, because that's what has perpetuated this long, is not enough of us doing what we can. So go home and figure that out.
thank you.
I think what I've left behind is fear, and I just speak my mind now. And anyone asks me about this, I have no fear about telling them. And if I feel like laying the responsibility at their feet, what do we do? And that's what I hope to take back is an eyewitness testimony. It's kind of like the doubting Thomas. You think, oh, well, I don't know. And then, once you put your fingers in the wound, you can say, well, I was there. I saw it. I touched it. I felt it. So I feel like I can give a strong testimonial based on having been physically here and walked into these places. And I hope to carry that forward to people and awaken their consciences.
So all of the pilgrims on this trip have formed a close-knit community, and I look forward to being back at St. John's and seeing these faces and hopefully remembering most of the names, and just sharing conversations to keep this going, lean into the tension and learn from it and work together to keep this momentum going. Wanted to say something. Thanks, Jennifer Allen, for organizing all the evening prayer sessions that we had. They were so profound and transcendent moments for me. We had thoughts to write in our journals. I made notes about what I was going to say today, but and then the sacred sharing that we had afterward. It's just been so much more than I thought it would be on this trip. I hope I'm speaking for everyone saying that.
Healing, renewed commitment and conviction, and I think that's come through being in community with other pilgrims along the way, and I am one alongside them and others and all of you along the way. And it's a profound thing to think about experiencing healing in the midst of a history, a legacy of so much pain and suffering, but also the hope of the promise that we've seen revealed in the work of the civil rights era, and the responsibility each Christian as a disciple can take in seeing that the work is left unfinished.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I just, having seen your itinerary, I just went, whoa, there's a lot. You've taken a lot. You've flown, you've rented cars, you've been on buses, you've been in lots of places. And just to think about the intentionality that has gone into this experience, you're reflecting, of course, on that as well. And Jennifer Allen, who was mentioned, just to give Jennifer an acknowledgement.
Yes.
Jennifer and Deacon Jack were the ones who had contacted me and talked through the logistics, and I was just in awe of all that has gone into this. And so, just thinking about the pilgrims and your journeys and what this means, and to hear about Christian discipleship and bystander and silence and evil and all those things, how real that is. And with that, I'd love to just take a moment to take any questions from the congregation. I'll borrow your mic here, and Reverend Laura will circulate with a mic, but if you'll just stand and offer a question, if you have any, and then whomever wants to answer at the table.
No, I'm not shy.
Yeah.
Doesn't need a mic.
Yeah, I mean. But anyway, I'm Randy Gamble. I am the co-founder and the ambassador for the Lynching Project of Memphis. And I have two questions that come to my mind. Because I remember Dr. King said, where do we go from here? And I'm asking the question, where are you going to go from here? And the second question is, is there or has there been conversation with African Americans?
You want to start?
Or just wherever you want.
Yeah, Nancy, why don't you talk about that?
Yes, we know of 7 people who were lynched in Colorado, and we found our 2 that are named, Calvin and Preston, and we visited them, but we're working on the other 5. We have William Washington from Ouray is up next, and we're getting another one from Pueblo. They're in the works. And yes, we have a group, we have Together Colorado and the Lynching Memorial Project, and we also have a reparations group that has African Americans in it. And we've connected with people at New Hope Baptist.
There's
Other
lots
questions?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay. St. John's Cathedral has a lively and very active social justice ministry and outreach ministries, if I can boast in the Lord. And of course, we want to grow it further and further, because I have a lot of people who want to see the good growth, and I want to see it too. And so personally, what I would like to see in the spectrum of building the beloved community at St. John's is to incorporate prison ministry into our work. That's a wonderful avenue for discipleship through Christ in the world that we do not currently do as a church, and perhaps it has been done in the past, but to see if I can plant the seeds for that, or I have been planting the seeds for that, to do that through an organization called Kairos. I don't know if people know Kairos, but that's a big organization that does that. So prison ministry, and we saw some of the connections to incarceration in the modern day at the EJI sites, of course. So prison ministry, and then authentic engagement with people of color in the Denver community. And we certainly have been doing some of that, and I'm encouraging the laity of St. John's to help us grow that, so that we might look at worship, service, formation, and fellowship, breaking bread together, and see if we can engage in those things to deepen relationships in Christ and see where that takes us.
Thank you.
I did want to say something about your second question. We had lots of conversations with African Americans, two in particular. Lonnie, who drove the bus for us, we all had a chance to become his personal friends, and he learned about us, we learned about him. Also, Wanda, whose last name I forget, she was our tour guide in Montgomery, and she had so much joy and enthusiasm showing the city where she was born and the school she went to, the church she went to, the neighborhood she lived in, and sharing that with all of us. And we're taking that back with us, and I think she has a little bit of each of us in her now too. So, yeah. Well, Jean is one of our pilgrims. I mean, sorry.
Other questions from the audience? Or maybe any remarks versus questions from the audience? It's a lot, but yes, here.
I'm one of the pilgrims, and we drove here. We partially experienced some of, not all for certain, but because I'm in a wheelchair, it's very difficult to get around. And we had to drive because the bus did not accommodate me. So, and I think all the pilgrims saw my difficulties of getting around and how I had to go to the bathroom and various and sundry things. So I think that was enlightening to them. But the one thing yesterday that really blew my mind was hearing the mothers talk about their lost children, their killed children. It was just very moving at the Legacy Center at the Lorraine Motel. They were there that day. They were talking about their wonderful, beautiful children.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
I have a question just to put out is, so being in Memphis, obviously we've come on pilgrimage here, and in our Episcopal tradition, we're of course connected, and so as a cathedral in St. John's, as an Episcopal church here in Memphis, and this is a historic place for many reasons, and so what is it like being a church that welcomes pilgrims on the way? Whether it's for civil rights or for other things. What's that like to be hosting people on this journey?
Well, I'm speaking personally. It's humbling. It's an honor. Grace St. Luke's is a wonderful community, and we're a community where we're always growing and learning and continually being transparent on who we are. You talked about Christian discipleship and the journey of it, and so we continue to look forward to opportunities to be in conversation with other people. And so thinking about a group of pilgrims coming, there's been just the excitement of having someone come. We as a parish have the Grace St. Luke's history team that's being intentional as well about just reflecting on history and celebrating who we are and considering the things that we can continue to do better as people of faith. And so this is, I know, personally excited to think about having someone else whose own journeys. Each of you has your own journey. I have my own journey. But Grace St. Luke's is a place that continues to practice hospitality and to be intentional. We too have a very strong outreach ministry. Some of its leaders are in this room, and those who are involved. We have a justice ministry. Some of its people are in this room, and so it's a part of the fabric of our parish, and I would say it's even becoming more a part of the fullness of who we are. So as a moment of just more community is always is meaningful to us. I have two hands here.
I would like to hear some of the racial justice programs that you have here, Father Ali.
So the most established one, we have a program here in the parish called Sacred Ground. And so, and also other parishes in the diocese have Sacred Ground. And then there is a beloved, Becoming Beloved Community Commission in the diocese that's recently starting to evolve as some of the initial programs. There have also been some racial healing conversations that have taken place. And I see that Amanda has a...
She does, and I just took the microphone back from her. I would add to what you just shared about courageous conversations, and that meets in a regular way around faith and current events about how to be a good neighbor and how hard that is and how simple it is and how we do it together in community. He mentioned Sacred Ground, Courageous Conversations, the History Team, and Beloved Community. So I would name those as well. Thank you. And Micah, Memphis Interfaith Coalition for Action and Hope. And that is something that we have done now for 4 years as a partner, which we gather with other partner members in the city. Many are churches, many are not, nonprofits, to say what are the 3 areas of need, because there's more than that, but 3 areas of need that we as a community want to focus on and put our power together with our voices and then go and speak with city council and our mayors to change community laws and rhythms that way. So you asked the question.
Good morning. I'm Amanda Maxon. I am a member and also a member of the vestry here at GSL and a native Memphian. One thing I just wanted to ask, having grown up in Memphis, folks are like, you meet people not from the South, and people are like, oh, well, that stuff is a Southern problem. And just want to maybe hear y'all say a little bit around how these experiences of being here kind of are going to sturdy you as you go back to kind of help maybe debunk that a little bit. That this, yes, you're being here in the South, but how are you taking that with you? Yeah, I'll just let y'all speak to that.
So if we can just hear from one, because we're at our time, if you can, Nancy, if you'll speak.
Being a non-Southerner from San Francisco, when I was a kid, I watched all this on TV, and we'd sit there, I was a teenager, and we'd say, wow, those people in the South, there's plenty of racism and injustice to go around, plenty of it right in San Francisco. We are aware. We are aware in Colorado. We have lynchings, we have a history, and we have problems right now, and that's why we're here. And so, the rest of the country doesn't need to stand in judgment of the South. There's plenty of it, sadly, to go around, so we're going to go back home and do what we can in Colorado to move forward. I appreciate your comment, because I'm sure you feel vilified in the South.
And in closing, Amanda, to your question, some of you may be aware there's a documentary called Traces of the Trade. Traces of the Trade is actually the story of slavery as it relates to the North. You know, all of the labeling historically has been about the South. And it was done by an Episcopalian who, as a part of her seminary studies, helped develop a program called Traces of the Trade, to Amanda's point, to make it clear that this isn't a Southern issue, it's a world issue, and that was one way to speak to that. So, well, thank you, friends, for your time. Let's just stand and give a round of applause to our speakers.
Thank you all.
And then also the 10:30 service, for those of you who are here from St. John.